For decades, Tohatsu outboards were trusted in the places where failure meant real danger, not inconvenience. Today, some owners say that legendary toughness is gone. But before blaming the engine, there's a deeper story most people never hear. First, let's start off with where the bulletproof image came from. For decades, Tohatsu outboards built a reputation that didn't come from adverts or shiny brochures. It came from docks, fish boxes, and people who judged engines the same way they judged hammers, by how much abuse they could take before giving up. Spoiler alert, Tohatsu took plenty. Back in the 1980s and 1990s, these engines weren't chasing records or flexing horsepower charts. They were built like the quiet bloke in the pub, who says nothing but somehow survives every bar fight. Low compression, conservative tuning, thick castings, and simple carburetors meant fewer failures and more tolerance for human stupidity. Tohatsu didn't mind bad fuel or skipped services. Leave one sitting for months, and it would cough into life like it was mildly annoyed, but still willing to work. While other engines sulked, the Tohatsu carried on. Commercial fishermen loved them because downtime meant lost money. Mechanics loved them because faults were obvious and fixable. In outboard terms, Tohatsu wasn't a sports car. It was a 1990s Japanese pickup that simply refused to die. Here's the strange part. Tohatsu didn't lose popularity because their engines were bad. They lost visibility because their engines were too good at the wrong things. While the rest of the outboard world started chasing excitement, more horsepower from smaller blocks, digital throttles, clever displays, and marketing that promised next-generation performance, Tohatsu stayed stubbornly practical. They kept building engines the way a farmer buys tools, simple, proven, and easy to fix when something eventually goes wrong. That worked brilliantly for commercial users, governments, coast guards, fishing fleets, and operators in places where breakdowns weren't an inconvenience, but a genuine crisis. Continued buying Tohatsu in huge numbers. Quietly, reliably, without Instagram posts. But recreational buyers shop differently. They compare spec sheets. They want smoothness, silence, gadgets, and bragging rights at the marina. And on paper, Tohatsu started to look boring. A bit like turning up to a car meet in a beige Toyota Hilux. Everyone knows it will outlive the sports cars, but nobody gathers around it with a camera. Tohatsu didn't shout about innovation, even when they updated designs. They didn't sell lifestyle. They sold machinery, and in an industry that increasingly sells aspiration, that is a risky move. So while Yamaha, Mercury, and Suzuki dominated conversation, Tohatsu quietly became the engine everyone respected, but few talked about. The kind of brand people recommended with a shrug and the phrase, "It will run forever," rather than excitement. Ironically, that silence planted the first seed of doubt, not because the engines got worse, but because people stopped seeing them. And when you disappear from the spotlight, rumors fill the gap. This is where things quietly went sideways, and most people still blame the wrong culprit. For years, Nissan Marine sold outboards that were, under the cowling, basically Tohatsu wearing a different badge. Same bones, same engineering philosophy, just a different logo on the front. Think identical twins, one wearing a suit, the other wearing work boots. Then Nissan decided to exit the outboard business. From a corporate perspective, it made sense. From an owner's perspective, it looked like chaos. Dealer networks shrank. Showrooms stopped stocking parts. People started hearing phrases like discontinued and no longer supported, which are terrifying words when bolted to the back of your boat. Here's the problem. Most owners did not separate Nissan Marine from Tohatsu. They just saw engines that used to have support suddenly becoming awkward to service. Online forums filled with stories about parts taking longer to arrive or dealers refusing to touch old Nissan outboards. Even though Tohatsu was still very much alive, still manufacturing engines, and still supplying parts, the perception damage spread like an oil slick. To the internet, nuance is optional. Suddenly, perfectly reliable motors were being blamed for corporate decisions they had nothing to do with. It is like blaming a microwave because the restaurant closed. That confusion quietly chipped away at Tohatsu's reputation, not because engines were failing at sea, but because trust was failing on land. And in the marine world, once doubt creeps in, it rarely stays contained. This is where the Bulletproof story finally started to crack. Not because Tohatsu wanted it to, but because the world stopped allowing engines to be built the old way. Emissions regulations tightened. Fuel economy targets got stricter. Electronics went from optional extras to legal necessities. Suddenly, every outboard manufacturer had to play by the same rules. And those rules were not friendly to overbuilt, slightly inefficient tanks. Tohatsu adapted, but adaptation comes with consequences. Carburetors gave way to EFI. Mechanical simplicity was replaced with sensors, ECUS, and warning systems that love pointing out when something is even slightly wrong. The margin for abuse shrank dramatically. Old Tohatsus would run badly and keep going. New Tohatsus prefer to not run at all until the issue is fixed. That felt like fragility to owners who were used to engines tolerating neglect like a bad haircut. Add in leaner fuel mixtures, tighter tolerances, and modern oils, and you get engines that are more efficient, cleaner, and technically better, but far less forgiving. It is the difference between a Nokia 3310 and a modern smartphone. Objectively better, but drop it wrong and things get expensive. Some owners treated modern Tohatsus like their old ones. Poor fuel storage, weak batteries, skipped services. When warning lights appeared or engines went into limp mode, blame landed on the brand. But the truth is uncomfortable. The engine did not get weaker. The rules got stricter, and Bulletproof stopped meaning what people thought it did. Another shift happened quietly, and it had nothing to do with engineering. The people using Tohatsu engines changed. Back in the day, Tohatsu's biggest fans were commercial operators, fishermen, and mechanics. These were people who measured reliability in thousands of hours, not weekend outings. If an engine ran rough but still pulled nets all day, it passed the test. Modern buyers are different. Many are first-time boat owners or recreational users. Their engines might only run a few weekends a month. Ironically, infrequent use is often harder on modern outboards than daily abuse. Batteries sulfate, fuel degrades, sensors throw fits, and suddenly, the engine that is barely used becomes unreliable. To a commercial operator, a fault light is information. To a new boater, it is panic. So you start hearing very different stories. One group says, this thing ran 4,000 hours with basic servicing. The other says, it shut down because my voltage dropped. Both are true. Both sound like reliability claims. Only one reflects real-world heavy use. Online reviews amplify this divide. Experienced users rarely write angry forum posts because they are too busy working. Frustrated new owners absolutely do. And because the internet loves complaints more than quiet success, those stories travel faster. It is a bit like judging a professional kitchen knife based on someone cutting frozen food on a glass plate. The tool did not change. The user expectations did. And over time, that shift in audience quietly rewrote the story around Tohatsu's reputation. Here is the honest answer, minus the marina gossip. Number: Tohatsu did not forget how to build reliable engines. What they lost was the ability to build engines that could ignore physics, legislation, and neglect all at once. Old Tohatsus were overbuilt because they were allowed to be. Emissions rules were looser, electronics were optional, and engineers could leave huge safety margins everywhere. Today, those margins are regulated out of existence. Modern Tohatsus are lighter, cleaner, more fuel efficient, and technically better in almost every measurable way. They produce more usable power from smaller blocks and burn significantly less fuel doing it. In commercial markets around the world, they are still trusted for the exact same reason they always were: they last. But the magic myth version of Bulletproof does not survive modernization. Engines are now precision tools, not blunt instruments. They demand clean fuel, healthy batteries, and basic maintenance. Treat them that way, and they will run for years. Treat them like a 1992 two-stroke that survived Civil War conditions, and you will be disappointed. The reputation did not collapse. It evolved, and like most good engineering stories, it became less dramatic once reality replaced legend. The idea of an outboard that forgives everything died. Tohatsu simply lived long enough to see that happen. Tohatsu's reputation did not explode overnight, and it was not ruined by bad engineering or cost-cutting shortcuts. It slowly faded because the world changed around it. Bulletproof once meant an engine that would run badly forever. Today, it means an engine that shuts itself down before damage becomes terminal. Those are two very different philosophies, and only one of them feels satisfying to an owner who grew up on stories from the old days. The legend was built in an era of mechanical honesty. If something went wrong, you could hear it, smell it, or feel it. Modern engines communicate through lights, buzzers, and software, which feels colder and less trustworthy, even when it is actually protecting the motor. Tohatsu did not betray its roots. It adapted while trying not to lose them. It still builds some of the lightest engines in class. It still partners heavily with commercial fleets and export markets. And it still prioritizes simple, conservative engineering compared to many competitors. The mistake people make is expecting old-school toughness in a modern regulatory world. That is like expecting a brand new jet airliner to fly without computers because prop planes used to be simple. The truth is this: Tohatsu did not become unreliable. Our definition of reliability changed. What used to mean will not die, no matter what now means, will not destroy itself, even when something goes wrong. And when you look at it that way, the legend did not really die. It just stopped being immortal. If you have owned an older Tohatsu, run a modern one, or heard a dockside story that swears one is better than the other, drop your experience in the comments. Like and subscribe if you enjoy proper marine history without the marketing fluff. Next time, we are breaking down which modern outboards are actually built to last and which ones are just pretending.